Well, I'm excited about today because I'm in with, first of all, my boy Co and Dr. Sonia Clybourne.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm always happy to be amongst brothers who are positive, who are trying to elevate the people. So I'm very happy and honored to be here. The subject that we're talking about, intergeneralization trauma, I think I learned most through my studies and learning about different people because I've worked in a variety of settings, working with different presentations of people. And what I noticed, I said, there's a difference how symptomologies show up, how they show up, how people are maintaining and sustaining. And I believe there's some spirituality stuff that's connected. And it wasn't until, as I stated to you before, I'm born and raised Southern Baptist. Christianity has been in my blood for a very long time, right? But then when I started studying other things, other traditional practices, I said, okay, this sounds like I'm integrating the material as a student. I'm like, okay, this may make sense of how some people are acting the way that they are, how they're behaving. So around 5 years ago, I became interested in the idea of intergeneralization trauma. I was reading a book about Courage to Heal. I've always been a victim advocate. As I stated, I've worked in a variety of settings, and I've always done work with victimology. And so trauma is part of that. And so I decided to start really peeling into the literature, the research, the empirical information. And there was Yohinda, a scholar, wrote about intergeneralization trauma with individuals who were from the Jewish background, who they're survivors of the Holocaust, and how intergeneralization impacted them. So I said, okay, in my bloodline, I have American Indian, I have Afro-Cuban, I have African American and Caribbean and all those. So I said, okay, I wonder if they have anything based upon Black people or the individuals that I just called. Very few and far between, maybe one article. So I said, oh, hold on, something is wrong here. So then I had the pleasure of reading Dr. Patricia Newton's book, Ibe Betunu. She recently passed away. And one, let me just say, doing this work, I've become more in tune to ancestors. Okay, because I think it's very important. And I think as we're looking at intergeneralization trauma, we have to pay attention to what happened to our ancestors.
Definitely.
Because what happened to them is happening to us. It's a cycle. And so part of that intergeneralization is knowing that, right? Because you're born from your father and mother, and they're born from their father. I mean, there are so many people connected to you. So how does that play in how you show up? How you show up, how does it play in terms of that? How you think, how you behave, how you relate, how you intellect, all those types of things. So that's how I came into really becoming more interested in the subject. And now it's become even more widespread for me.
Once again, my lens or cultural lens is always coming from the traditional canon of scripture. And anytime the Most High would speak is always generationally. It was always to generations. And you would see certain stories like, Abraham lied about his wife and then his son lied about his wife. So people are like, oh, they wrote the story back to back, it's off. Well, yes, that's a perspective. Or it's just letting you know that you are your father. You know what I'm saying? You're going to pick up, one begats another. And then some people are born, like they say, some are born into iniquity, which they think like that's a curse. It's not necessarily a curse per se, but it's a transgenerational passage. Just like when you see a person physically, like, oh, he has my nose, he has my eyes, he has my, this. Oh, they also got your temper. They also got your temperament. They also got your perception, the way you perceive things. So I love to stay, I don't know if someone else brought this up, but that whole idea of we are the fullness of our ancestors. That they're not dead. They are still alive through you. And that was the power of passing on seed and childbearing and family, because that is the creative process connecting back to the source or back to the creator. But in this environment we're in, that's not encouraged, and it's been perverted, and it's been misogynized, and it's been, you got all these different factors that are part of the trauma. Back to what we were saying before with your transgenerational trauma. So you saw there were no articles really, and then what did that push you to do?
Well, then I found a book, the Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome book.
Yes. What was that?
DeGray, yeah. And Dr. Joy DeGray. And so when I read that book, oh my goodness, my eyes were open.
Yeah.
So then after, they have the reference page. So as a learner, I go back, and a student, I'm reading, seeing all the articles. So then I became more intrigued, right? And then so then I've already started seeing people, and I have a diverse, clientele. But then the more people who came to me of color, they were wanting to speak about spirituality and connection to psychology. And when you think about psychopathology, it means soul suffering.
Wow. That makes sense. Okay. Yes.
And so I said, okay, this is even deeper. So every year, I became more immersed. And, Olodumare, God was using me in some way, because now I'm able to kind of make sense and have people make sense of their history, of their family. I have the Western knowledge, the doctoral degree from, psychology and knowing all the theories, but also looking at family history, genetics, epigenetics, all those things. So biology, evolution, all those types of things kind of go into hand. And as we've spoken before, you have to look at it from an integrative perspective, right? How all things tie in together. And I think that's where I've been. I didn't know that, but I'm still growing in it.
And that's the journey. You even go, even if you go back to ancient African traditions like Kemet and stuff, they were always tapping into soul, like the Book of the Dead. So they didn't look at death as we've been taught in the Western thought process. It was more of transition, like who you were, you always are. You just manifest in different things. Everything is cyclical and cyclical. It's the ant is there to do its part, to do this, to eat this, and then it comes full circle. And then, we're constantly in this, as they say, the circle of life, which is an African understanding. And as we tap back into that space and we're learning, we need to be sensitive to one another instead of just, oh, you're wrong because you didn't say it like this, or you didn't do it like this, or that's a part of the whole divide and conquer that keeps us from tapping in. And that none of us can have a whole monopoly on who the creator is, on who God is. It's impossible. That's the journey. So I respect people who, as you learn more, you realize a little bit that you do know.